This soft golden loaf is sweetened with honey, packed with oats, and made right in the bread machine. It's simple, nourishing, and perfect for beginners, with flavor that feels anything but basic. There's something special about a loaf that's made with oats and sweetened with honey. This bread bakes up soft and hearty, and the bread machine does most of the work. I'll show you how to make it, step by step. To make this recipe, you're going to need 3 cups of bread flour, 1 cup of quick oats, 3 tablespoons of room temperature butter, 1/4 of a cup of honey, 2 1/4 teaspoons of yeast, 1 1/2 teaspoons of salt, 1/2 cup of whole milk, 3/4 of a cup of warm water. Now that we have our ingredients together, we are ready to put them into the bread machine. Of course, we're going to start off by oiling our paddle. This makes removing the paddle easier when it's time to take the paddle out so that it doesn't stick. And what I usually do is whatever fat or oil I'm using in my recipe, I just dip the end of my paddle into it. And in this case, I have softened butter. So I'm just going to put a little butter on the end of it and then stick it down on my paddle, on my stem, and it'll be ready to take out when the time comes. So now we're going to start off by adding our water, 3/4 of a cup of warm water, 1/2 cup of whole milk, and I like to use whole milk because it gives the bread a richness and a softness. And we're going to add our 1 1/2 teaspoons of salt, and we're going to add our 1/4 cup of honey. We're going to go ahead and add our room temperature butter, 3 tablespoons of room temperature butter to our liquid. And we're going to put in our yeast, 2 1/4 teaspoons of yeast. And to that, we're going to add our 1 cup of quick oats. Then on top of that, we're going to add our 3 cups of bread flour. Now let's pop it into the machine. So we're just going to place our pan into the KBS and give it a little twist, and that locks it in. Push that handle over, and we are going to go to menu option number 1. And for our loaf size, we are actually going to choose the 1-pound loaf. Now this is a 2-pound loaf, but we are choosing a 1-pound loaf because we want a lighter crust. This bread is almost crustless, which makes it just wonderful. So if you choose the smaller loaf size on your bread machine, it won't bake quite as hot or quite as long. And then for the color, we are going to choose light on the crust. And on the KBS, that gives us 3 hours and 6 minutes. We're going to hit start, and we're going to let it mix for about 4 or 5 minutes and decide if we need to add any more liquid or perhaps any more flour. So the dough's only been mixing for a couple of minutes, but I just wanted you to see how it looked, and I'm going to scrape down the sides because that honey is quite sticky. And at this time, it looks really dry, but I'm not going to add any extra liquid yet because you got to give those oats time to absorb the liquid. So we're going to let it keep mixing, and then we'll check the consistency of our dough ball here in a couple of minutes. It's been mixing for 3 minutes. It's still a little dry. What I'm going to do is I'm going to pause the bread machine, and I'm going to let it sit here for about 4 or 5 minutes, and then we will turn it back on. This just gives the flour and the oats time to autolyze and absorb the liquid so that we make sure we have the right dough consistency and don't add too much liquid too soon. Okay, it's been a few minutes, and I can see that this dough ball is still pretty firm. So I'm going to go ahead and add about a tablespoon of water, and then turn the machine back on and see if that gets it to the consistency that I want. So after that little rest and adding the extra water and letting it knead for a little while, we can see that the dough is now the consistency that we want it. It's soft and pliable, just slightly sticky, but not dry. So after the bread machine has finished the first rise, and it did the knockdown of the dough, it's time to take the paddle out. And on the KBS machine, it will say that fermentation 3 is beginning, which is actually the second rise. And I always just take the paddle out and reshape the dough into a nice ball so that my final product is shaped nicely, and put it back into the machine. Now this step is completely optional, but for this loaf I made an egg wash out of an egg and a tablespoon of water, and mix that together really well, and then take a brush and brush it all over the top of the bread dough. And then after I get the egg wash on, I take some of the raw quick oats and sprinkle those on the very top. This will just give our bread a nice, beautiful look and lets everyone know that it is oat bread. It is that very most wonderful time to take the bread out of the bread machine. And just look at this beautiful loaf of bread. Ooh. Look how beautiful that is. Now what we want to do is we want to let this sit in the bread pan if it is not loose. So what I do is I give it a little shake, and if it is not completely loose in that pan, what you want to do is just cover it up with your cotton towel and let it sit for a couple of minutes, and then we will come back and give it another test and see if it's loose, and then we'll take it out to cool. Okay, so we've let it sit in the pan for a little while. I'm going to give it another shake to make sure it's loose. That way it doesn't stick to the pan. So that's a really good beginner's tip to know. Then it just slides right out, and the only hole we have is where the stem that held the paddle was. We're going to sit here on our cooling rack and let it cool. Then we'll be back to slice it up. Our bread has cooled down, and now we can cut into it and see the beautiful crust on the inside. Just look at this beautiful crust. It is so soft and fluffy. The oats give it added moisture and softness to the texture, and just make for a wonderful, hearty, soft slice of bread. Great for making sandwiches or toast, or serving as a bread side with your meal. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please consider subscribing to the channel if you've not already done so. Hit that like button so YouTube knows you liked the video, and share this video with your friends. God bless. Bye-bye.